me check and make sure we're all live. Sound is on. Oh.
Check, check.
Oh, my sister-in-law's there. Hey, Courtney.
Hey, buddy.
All right, so I called it online worship, which I'm going to have to rename that file later.
Called it what?
They called it online worship, which it is
Online
not.
worship.
It is not that. No. Okay. All right.
Hey, bud. No.
There we go. Okay. All right. A little bit of that. Any hand sanitizer up here?
Nope.
No. Well, we'll get
We
some
just
later.
lick your hands right off.
Yay, Courtney! Who else is it? Just you, Courtney, or you got the clan there too? Oh, Tana's there. Good.
Quarantine life is wonderful.
It is.
We just sit at home all day, working from home,
Went for a walk today.
walking around the neighborhood. Man, the weather was nice. Good weather today.
I'm so glad that we had that sun, that the kids could play outside a little bit today. That was really good. It was really good. A few more days of rain might have been it. All right, the beans. Great. Good. Oh.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Deidre.
Deidre.
And Karen. Good. Great.
Hey, Karen.
Well, everybody just coming in. Hey, we are going to be in John 18, so if you want to grab a Bible and
Cell phone?
yeah, that's the catch with some folks, using
They're watching us on their cell phone. They can't use it.
You're
for a
using
Bible.
your normal Bible to stream for. That kind of
Yeah.
makes things a little more complicated, doesn't it? Go run real quick and blow off that paperweight version. Yeah. We'll be ready here in about 30 seconds. John Petty. Now,
Hey.
John's actually annoyed about this because he was, I'm sure, looking forward to teaching this last Sunday.
Yeah.
Or this, it would have been this last Sunday. So, we're sorry, John. We stole it from you, buddy.
John's probably going to go live stream teaching it himself on a competing YouTube channel.
Oh,
I'm
man.
surprised he's not doing that right now.
Man, if we have dueling channels, we'll be in trouble. Okay, everybody, welcome to our class for today, and we are going to be in John 18. And so, if you want to grab a Bible and join us for the study, and for this. More so than what we did on our Sunday stream, we will be paying attention to the comments, and Rylan's going to help a lot with that. And we're going to, so if you have some questions that you want to ask about the text or about something that we say as we go along, then you are welcome to do that. Okay, all right. I'm going to grab Rylan. I'm not going to grab Rylan. I'm going to make sure and plug my computer in.
Good idea. We got 14% battery.
Yeah, we need to make sure we have all the battery that we need.
What an amateur.
I'm telling you, right? Unbelievable. And we just waited.
Hey, Bakers.
All right,
And Andrea is here.
We were just waiting.
This is great. Yeah, we're waiting on you guys. That's why.
That's right. All right. Andrea Davis. Very good. All right. Well, we're glad that you guys are all here. And that we can join. Sorry, I just flubbed that. I made sure. I'm glad I had the cord and I didn't have to run across the street to my house to get it. That would have been.
I don't have one of those.
But even worse. So, okay, everybody, we're in John 18, and we want to share this now. This is something is going. This text would feel very familiar. Okay, because it is part of the Passion narrative. It's part of the story of Jesus' arrest, his betrayal, his arrest, his death, and of course the resurrection. We call all of that together. We call the Passion. Okay,
like the movie. We saw the movie.
That's right.
Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, and it comes from a Latin word meaning to suffer, okay? And these are the things that happened to Christ in his suffering. And in this part of the book, John, of course, is going to hit a lot of the familiar elements. So we have a garden scene of the arrest. We have the trials, and then we have of course, several elements of the crucifixion that are going to be similar too. But like everything else in the gospel, John does it in a very distinctive way, right? So tell me, hey, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Rollin. Tell me some of the things that you've noticed that are kind of different about the way John has done a lot of the book before now that might be different than what you would read in, say, Mark. You have any kind of comments about
Oh, man. I think the way that he portrays Jesus talking to people and how you don't see a lot of his sermons. You see mostly his reaction to people asking him questions about his sermons.
Yeah.
And it's a lot about just who Jesus is. It's like John had a theological statement that he wanted to make, maybe that he wanted to explain more than anything just who Jesus actually was,
right?
Versus like what his teachings were.
Right, and then you have these observations about his relationship with the Father, which are very different than what you get in the others. And also you have less of these just kind of like one and done little like stories where he interacts with a group of people and then has some like kind of wise saying and then goes on to the next story. Like Mark tells all these stories that are like, 6 verses long. John's stories aren't like that. They're like 70 verses long,
There's some long chapters.
Yeah, the chapters are much longer, and a lot of times you have these, like, you're right, the way he talks to people, he has these like these long extended conversations. So if you think about it, what we've seen in John, like you have the conversation with Nicodemus in chapter 3, you have the woman at the well in chapter 4, you have the long conversation about like the meaning of bread and that you're eating his flesh in chapter 6.
Conversation with the people who liked him, where he yelled at them for a long time.
In chapter, that's at the end of chapter 6.
It was like his followers, right? Yeah.
And then you have you got chapter 9. There's this like long. Not just conversation with Jesus, but long kind of dialogue with the blind man and the people that are kind of investigating him. You get something like that in chapter 5 as well too, but with the person that's healed there at Bethesda. But you have these like different like conversations that are super just long and drawn out. Even like some of the miracle stories, like the Lazarus story it's a resurrection story. You have resurrection stories in the other Gospels too. Mm-hmm. But the resurrection story of Lazarus is like this long chapter. It has this like all this back and forth to it. So all of that is different. All of that is unusual in the way that John tells his story. And so we're not surprised when we come to chapter 18, and John is going to tell that story in his own way too. And it has some twists and turns. It's very Johannine. Okay, that's the way that's the adjective that you use to describe something. It's very Johnish. I think Johnish is better.
Not Johannian.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you could say it that way. Yeah, too. Yeah. But Johnish is that's the folk way. I'm gonna try to make that a thing. Is the way people talk about it. But it's Johnny? A very Johnny. No, you can't do that because it's like Johnny? A name. Yeah, because that's just.
Maybe that's what we mean when we say Johnny. You're very much like John.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Sorry, rabbit trail. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry there. We're very it is very Johnny. It's very John-ish sort of way of telling the story. And I want to pick up 2 particular ways of doing that. Okay, and the first one is maybe the lesser of the 2 Johnish sort of ways. And that is to kind of pick up the theme of betrayal. Okay. Now, John, in order to kind of get this, we need to dip back a couple of chapters. Okay. And think about the betrayal as something that really is being keyed off all the way in this long conversation between chapters 13 and 17. Like we've kind of been anticipating the betrayal.
Yeah.
Okay, and actually there's a mention of Judas before that, okay? We get it in, it's in chapter 12, in the first few verses of chapter 12. There's this moment where Mary, Lazarus' sister, comes and anoints Jesus's, feet.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is where she uses the oil, and it says Judas says, why didn't you sell that and give it? Because he was the one in charge of the money. Right?
That's right. Yeah. So he uses and it's not just like he has his criticism, but John. You almost get the feeling that the writer of the book can't stand Judas.
Oh, he hates Judas.
He's very bitter about it.
He was a thief. He says it. He was a thief.
Yeah, he says it there's this kind of, we had these other notes about things that they realized later, kind of coming back they didn't realize that Jesus was talking about his body or whatnot. I think this is that kind of note. It's we didn't really know it at the time. But
he was stealing money.
Yeah. So what it says is Judas Iscariot, after Mary has poured this perfume on Jesus' feet, and it says Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him. It is already telling us that about Judas. And then it says, Judas says, why was perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? He calculates how much it could be sold for immediately, right? And then it says this about him. He said this not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Okay, and then Jesus kind of rebukes him after that. And then, onward we go, right? Mm-hmm. And then in chapter 13, we get this couple of things that I think are pretty significant. After the washing of his disciples' feet. Mm-hmm. Again, notice the connection there. Did you notice the connection to this, by the way? That in chapter 12, the ending of the first half of the book of John ends with somebody washing Jesus' feet.
Oh, yeah.
And then
it starts with that, him washing someone else's.
Yeah, right. So it kind of bookends it out. And so in this story, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. Of course, he has that interaction with Peter, and in that interaction, Jesus says, Peter says, "You're never going to wash my feet." Okay, so this is chapter 13, that's verse 8. And then Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." And verse 9, Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash, except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." And then verse 11 gives us another note, right? For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason, he said, "Not all of you are clean." Okay, so we're kind of
throwing some shade.
Yeah, we're throwing some shade already. And Jesus, on the words of Jesus here, right?
He threw some shade. That's what I meant.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. In the words of Jesus, Jesus says something indicating that one of them is to be betrayed.
Yeah.
And of course, that's gonna come down a little bit for more here. That's going to intensify because after he's with the washing of the feet, in verse 21 it says this: "After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, 'Very truly I tell you, one of you will betray me.'" And that is, so let's pick up that, right? It is very telling that when Jesus is troubled in spirit here, it's because of the fact of his betrayal. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not just, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to go through these hard things, but Jesus is in anguish. He's anguished because he's about to be betrayed. He was stabbed in the back, right? Yeah. And that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I last time we talked about how Jesus's glory came when he knew that his apostles believed in him, right?
Right.
And
exactly.
So you can understand, this is a good juxtaposition. Is that the right word?
Yeah, sure.
Against that, to say that,
there's belief, and then
and then there's Judas who does not believe and therefore betrays him, and that's what's giving him the most grief, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So you have the thing that's filling Jesus with joy, okay, and then the thing that fills him with anguish is his disbelief. All right, and so then we get Jesus is going to develop this a little bit, right? So he says, "One of you is going to betray me," and as the disciples are wont to do, they start chit-chatting about what he means, right?
Yeah.
And the disciples looked at each other, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. And Simon Peter, therefore, motioned him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. But I love this, by the way, that like it's not just so he asked him, like it includes the note. So Simon Peter motioned to him, not even said to him or whispered to him. It's like, so it like literally the text is like, ask him who it is, John. We need to know. Just ask him. Ask him. You know, you kind of get this sense there. So here we go. So that's what's going on in this part of the moment. Okay, and so then we have this. All right, now get this bit. And so while reclining next to Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" And I can imagine him saying it like out of the side of his mouth, right? Like he doesn't want to call attention. He's like, "Who is it, Jesus?" Okay. And then Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." And so when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered him. And Jesus said to him, "Do quickly what you're about to do." No one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought it was because Judas had the commonest purse, that Jesus was telling him, go buy what we need for the festival, or that he should give something to the poor. Ironically, because he said that in chapter, the chapter 12 thing, right? And so after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. By the way, that night thing is very intentional, right? Like, it's the falling of night comes with Judas's movement to betray. Okay, and John's all about light and darkness, right?
Yeah. And so the apostles are still confused because Jesus only answered the one, right? He didn't say it out loud to everyone. So there's only one guy that knows, and maybe Peter. I don't know. Peter told him to ask. I don't know.
Yeah. You see, you get the sense that there's something going on, but not everybody understands for sure.
Yeah.
So there's something I want to pick up here, though, in this story, because this story kind of flips a bunch of symbols on its head, right? Namely, okay, so what is it that they're gathered here? What is it, especially if we think about it in the other Gospels, what do we think of them, this moment is that they're gathering in to do?
For the Passover.
Right. And in the other
festival around the Passover.
Right, exactly. And the gathering that we think about in the other Gospels that Jesus has with his disciples right before he's betrayed and arrested is what?
The Last Supper?
Yeah, the Last Supper, right. Like where he institutes the Lord's Supper, where he, and in those, he like takes bread and blesses it and said, "Take and eat, this is my body, which is given for you," or this is the fruit of the vine, take the fruit of the vine, the cup of the fruit of the vine, and which is the blood of my covenant, which is given for you. And so you have these other stories, the other Gospels tell these stories of this like Eucharist, the Lord's Supper, where Jesus gives thanks, and then he breaks the bread and he gives it to his disciples. And it's kind of what will become for them this great ritual, of the church. John, in his telling of his version of the Last Supper, the only person that Jesus gives bread to is Judas.
I was looking at that. I guess I missed it. He doesn't even have the Lord's Supper in John.
This is it. Yeah, this is it. And what a strange way to do it.
Yeah.
Right? It really is. I know. I see you're like, no, that can't be right.
I didn't think that was true. Right. It's here somewhere.
No, this is it. Yeah, this is as close as we get. And there's some other reasons why I think that is, but I just think, we've talked about how John takes symbols, baptism and communion, and he kind of like scatters them through the book and kind of shows their meaning, like the water to wine episode in the Cana miracle, and then these stories about him standing up and saying, I give you living water, and in here we get this Eucharist kind of this communion episode, but the person who receives it centers around the character who will moments later betray Jesus. So I think that's meant to say to those of us who gather at the table, I think it kind of calls us to look at that sign that we receive often, and like it ought to make us like hold up a second, right?
Yeah.
Like taking that bread doesn't mean it's not like automatically,
It's not a magical like talisman or or something. And we've got a lot of good comments about how just Satan had entered Judas, and at that moment, right? And so it's like the opposite of communion. It's like anti-communion or something. Like we think of taking the communion and having the Holy Spirit with us there. But this says he took it and Satan entered him. Yeah,
it's like, that's what I mean. It's like the opposite.
Yeah.
Of a magical communion.
So
which makes me just scary. It makes me think. As we take, as we take the bread, like the bread is a part of our discipleship, right? And we're there. We commune with the Lord. The Lord does break the bread and give it to us, but we should be in that moment of taking the bread. Like I do think we're meant to kind of weigh our faithfulness to the Lord, recommit our faithfulness to the Lord, and we have always the possibility of choosing not to. I think that's part of this story. It's a very strange. Oh man, that's Karen. That's a great insight. Bread, we use it to mean money. Cash in our. And here the emphasis with Judas. I just think this is a strange. Judas is the only disciple in this story that Jesus gives this broken bread to. Isn't that something?
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I would have just read right over that. Yeah. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, it's part of emphasizing. Okay. Now, so here's something that I want to just kind of blow your mind with a little bit too.
Again?
Yeah. I love this. This is my favorite thing. I like doing it live. Okay. All right. So that connection of communion and betrayal is not as weird as you might think. All right. Paul, when he talks about the Lord's Supper in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, listen to the way he introduces the story. This is verse 23 of 1 Corinthians 11. For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night, not when he was arrested or killed or anything like that, on the night when he was betrayed, took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you." Isn't that interesting that the language of betrayal is even in Paul's, like, what, on the night he was betrayed, and that's kind of like liturgical. A lot of people use that liturgical language even today when they're talking about the Lord's Supper, introducing the Lord's Supper. But it's not on the night he was arrested. Like that's not the language that the early church used to describe that. It was on the night that he was betrayed, because the betrayal that Jesus was somebody that not just like some faceless machinery arrested and killed, not just some zealous lawman. Okay, that it was one of his closest disciples. It was one of his disciples who betrayed him. That's like integral to the story of Jesus' suffering.
Yeah, I guess that's the more emotional thing that happened, right? So that kind of makes sense, because I mean, of course, like the leaders in Jerusalem wanted to capture him. I mean, that was kind of known, but the betrayal was. I mean, I guess Jesus knew about it, but it hurts more, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really human to me, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, betrayal feels awful.
Yeah,
it does, and there are very few lonelier feelings in the world than feeling betrayed, and it is a kind of human suffering. It's kind of an intense human suffering, and here John seems to go at great lengths to kind of highlight that Jesus is betrayed. Yeah,
and we've all felt that too, right? It's happened to everybody. We've done it to other people. I mean, it's a human experience that you're right, that we've all had.
Yeah, but it's also too that I think another thing that he's highlighting, which is important to his whole story. Okay, kind of pull us back into John 18, is that even though he was betrayed, he wasn't tricked. Okay, Jesus hasn't been bamboozled.
Right.
He knows it's coming, and in some way, he almost sends Judas to do it.
Yeah, kind of the other way around. He's doing the bamboozling in a way.
Yeah. Like he is certainly aware of Judas's intent. He's certainly aware of what will happen to him because of it. Okay, and so it's not that Jesus is betrayed but he's not ambushed. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like, oh, you caught me, I couldn't get away. Like, Jesus has time, and if he wanted to evade this whole thing, he absolutely could. I think part of the reason that that's underlined for us, and we're definitely going to see it as we read more in John 18 now, that highlights Jesus's control over this situation. Okay, what's going to happen? Not that Jesus is making different people do it. I don't have that kind of view of the way sovereignty works in the story.
Yeah.
But Jesus is very much allowing these things to happen and is willingly and knowingly walking into this situation, okay, where it's going to play out. And even though things are happening to him, listen to the way this arrest story plays out, and you'll see what I mean about like the way Jesus is depicted as being in control. Now that's a common thing in some of the other gospels, but it is like it just pops off the page in John. Okay, after Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. And then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, right, came forward and asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "I did not lose a single one of those that you gave me." And then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. And Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me?" Okay? All right. So you see what I'm saying about Jesus kind of being depicted as in control there? Okay? Let's start from the end of that, okay, and pick up a note that said what's the last verse there? Verse 11.
Yeah. 11. I
got
lost.
Tell me the last phrase that he says here. Okay?
Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?
Okay, so again,
that's kind of like the Eucharist.
Yeah, it's an allusion. Yeah, it's again an allusion to the supper. And again, John isn't giving it to us straight.
So does John does it have the prayer that says, "May this cup pass from me"? Okay.
No. Yeah.
So John knows about these other gospels, right? Or something.
Absolutely.
He's riffing off of some of these ideas that we already know from.
But backwards.
Yeah.
Like in the other gospels, he says, "If it is your will, let this cup pass from me." But in John, he looks at Peter and says, "What am I? Should I not take the cup that's mine to drink?" He's saying, "Bring it on."
Yeah.
Right. And that's a significant difference. What's underneath that difference? Well, it's the portrayal of Jesus as being in control.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And it also is this like significance of the. It's the significance of the cup too. So again, this kind of calls disciples who often gather around a cup, and it reminds them that this is what they are consuming is the call to sacrifice. You know.
Yeah, Andrew puts it pretty well. He says, "I love that Jesus willingly goes with them, but leaves no room for anyone to think that he doesn't have the whole situation under control. He almost pushes it."
Yeah,
he kind of does. He's like, bring it.
Yeah,
let these guys go."
And there's a point behind that too. Okay, so there's a couple points. The first point is just the control, the sovereignty of Jesus. Jesus is the king in this story.
They fall down before him. That's weird, right?
Yes, it's weird. I know, isn't it? It's like you look at the story. I know the story of the betrayal and crucifixion of Jesus, but you read it, John's version of it straight, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole mob falls down because he comes forward, okay? Verse 4 says he comes forward to them. So Jesus doesn't just wait for them. He draws up to them. And then he says something to them. What is it that he says?
Who is it you want?
Yeah. And they say, Jesus of Nazareth. And he says,
I am he.
It's me. And then they all step back. He's stepping forward. They step back and they fall to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a remarkable piece of the story, okay? And then he does it again. Now, the picture of this is, it's amazing. This mob of people is laying on the ground, and Jesus is standing over them. And so he says, again, he's over them, right? Yeah. And he says, who are you looking for? And they say, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I told you, that's me. Let these other guys go.
And I've seen some movies about this, right? And they've never shown this part of the scene, right? Have you ever seen one where they do this?
There's a version of the Gospel of John, which I haven't
seen that.
Actually, I want to do like an internet watch party with that. It's on Amazon Prime, okay? And so anybody that has that, we're going to have a time. I haven't decided what time yet. So sometime very soon, this is going to be crazy. We're going to watch that movie and like stream together, like responding to it as it goes.
I like that.
I don't know how that'll go. It seems magical, but we're going to try.
People do that now. That's a thing people do, though. Yeah. If you don't know that,
we're like live
streaming. Yeah,
of us watching it. Yeah. But anyway, so that does capture that scene a little bit, but it is like super bizarre. The point of it, this kind of gets us to the other point of it. So what's the point of him saying that? First of all, it is that he's in control, but there's something else going on. What else is he doing when he asserts himself that way?
He's fulfilling a prophecy. So like he's telling them, I'm the one you're looking for. Let everyone else go. Right. Yeah. So he's like, I will give myself to you freely, no fight, nothing, but let all my disciples leave.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's making sure that they get off the hook, okay? Which is super significant for John specifically, okay? Because what has Jesus been teaching them about the way that they're supposed to live in the world? Like that conversation between chapter 13 and 16, what was he saying? He says, the thing that's going to mark you guys as disciples is your love for each other, okay? And then in chapter 15... he very specifically says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And in the story of Jesus' betrayal and arrest that we get in John, it's very clear that he steps in front of this crowd for the sake of the disciples. He says, no, you're going to let them go. I'll go with you. That's the way he uses. So he's in control, but he doesn't use his control. He doesn't use his power in the situation to get away. He uses it for the other people there.
Yeah. I haven't thought about that connection. Usually when we think about that verse, we think, that means I'm a friend of Jesus because he died for me. And that's true, but we don't think about how it like immediately happens a couple chapters later. Right?
Yeah, it's right there. And John really highlights it too. Like in the other Gospels, Jesus is arrested and he goes, and there is a sense of it. This is the thing that's happening for the sake of his disciples. Okay, especially, as we know that's the theology of the church and all that. But John just makes it so explicit. Like it kind of gives us a way of seeing that it was for, it was for them. Yeah. Andrea, that is an excellent point. Okay. Andrea says, this is the courage that he wanted Peter to have. So Peter thinks he's going to join Jesus in taking control of the situation too, but he does it differently, right?
He does. He chops off someone's ear.
Yeah.
And for some reason, they don't kill him. I don't understand.
Because of Jesus.
Maybe because they're all laying on the ground?
Yeah, it's because of Jesus. Because Jesus' intervention on his behalf. By the way, this version of the story John doesn't tell us that about the man being healed. It tells us his name, but his name is Malchus, but it doesn't tell the part where Jesus takes his ear and puts it back on and heals him. And I think, is that the Luke version? I think it's Luke.
I don't know.
But Yeah, let's just look at this up. Somebody may know this. They may know this offhand. Which version it is where he heals the man?
It'll take 30 seconds.
Here we are. We're in
That's
Luke.
how far behind we are from
from
people
them?
that are watching.
All right. Well, I'm going to beat them to it then. All right. So it says in this is Luke chapter 22. It says one of them. It doesn't say it was Peter. One of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear, but it doesn't tell us the name, right? But Jesus said, "No more of this," and he touched his ear and healed him.
I wonder if this was a thing back then. Like, who is this guy? We need to know.
Yeah,
we need
John's
to know who
like,
has the magic ear.
I want to know that you guys. I know that I had that story. Well, I mean, there are some traditions that this guy becomes a disciple. I think there are some. I don't know if anything. There's nothing in the Bible about it, but this is one of those things.
Yeah, and Andrew says she's referring to the denial of Jesus, and so that's also true, right? So Jesus wanted Peter to have the courage to. Or I guess he wanted to show him that he didn't have the courage, right?
Yeah.
And then he's modeling the courage that he should have had.
Yeah. So instead of Peter's willingness to say at his own risk when he is being accused, say, "Yes, I am with him," and I will gladly, take on whatever suffering is his. Peter avoids suffering for himself. Yeah. Now I don't know I have no idea what he was trying to do there in the garden. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those things that happened, in the Gospels was recorded, and they each tell, and I love that John and Luke tell different details about it. That there's one that's just his healing. I almost wonder if John the author knows this guy later, and he's like, "I'll tell you who it is. It's Malchus. The guy that's part of that church. He's part of that church down in Antioch right now. He ended up leaving Jerusalem.
The guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You hear stories about first century Christians and the legends that they have and things like that. And like when Jesus healed someone or touched a kid, that kid grew up to be so and so who was one of the founding fathers or whatever. I don't know if they maybe thought this guy was some kind of
who knows.
I don't know.
But at any rate, we get that story. It's a fascinating story. I love the way that both of these two things, the way that John tells this very familiar story in a way that brings to light these pieces of this theology, right? That he is in control, but uses his power for the sake of other people, not for his own sake. And also that Jesus indeed, he is betrayed. Like he experiences this very real human suffering, and he allows that to happen. Okay, he calls Judas out, but not in such a way that prevent him from doing it.
And he could have.
Yeah, very much could have. So these are the kind of key features that I wanted us to kind of pick up tonight. Yes, that's right, Andrew. The high priest's servant. Yeah. And of course, we're going to go from this, and we're going to have some other interactions in the trials. We're not going to pull through all the pieces of the trials tonight, but we are headed towards when Jesus walks away with them here. In verse 12, it says, "So the soldiers and their officer and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him, and then they take him to Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest." It says Caiaphas is the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. That's something that happened earlier, John.
He seemed like he was okay, kind of. Is he the okay one, or is he? Or is that someone else? No?
Well, you'll see. Yeah, we'll kind of play out. We are going to pick up this Sunday in chapter 19, where Jesus has been sentenced to death. Okay. And we're going to pick up with the story of the crucifixion and look at the way that John portrays that and gives us insight into who Jesus is in that phase of the story. Folks, if you haven't, if you're not on our church email list, you're not going to get the announcements today. Okay, I don't know that we probably don't need to read out stuff. Personal stuff. Those usually have hospitalizations and things like that. We're not going to read those out on our live stream. But if you don't get the church emails, then email the office at cedarlanechurch@gmail.com. We'll make sure those get to you. Militia sends those out every Wednesday. She does a fantastic job.
Thanks, Militia.
Yeah, thanks, Militia. Melissa does a great job of doing a lot of things that keep our congregation running. And she and Jennifer have done that for a long time. I appreciate it. But if you will email them, she'll make sure that you're on our email list, and you'll get not just that Wednesday night announcement sheet, but you'll also get the stuff that we send out on we send the bulletin out live or Friday afternoons and those sorts of things. So make sure and do that. And then besides that, we'll be back on Sunday morning. And so at 9:00 Sunday morning, we'll be ready for another live stream worship. And we got a couple of things. I've got a couple of things up my sleeve for that, Rylan.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'll find out when you do.
I look forward to blowing your mind again live. No, we've got some contributions that I think are really neat, and I can't wait to share them with you guys. Okay, so we will see you on Sunday morning. And normally when we say that, we're like, well, maybe we'll see you between now and then, but probably not because of the way the world's working here. Everybody stay home, be safe, and then remember to continue to engage. I've heard lots of great stories about anytime I've called several people from our church, and I'm calling to check on them. How are you doing? And then they'll say, oh, so-and-so just called me, and so I know that you guys have taken seriously that challenge to be making sure to check on other people in our church. So keep doing that. Let's keep working together to get through this thing together. Okay?
Yeah, thank you for everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you for all of you commenting. Karen, you had a bunch of great funny comments, and I just couldn't keep up with you. So thank you for all of those. Thank you again, everybody, and we miss you guys, and we love you guys. And Jordan needs help moving tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you a call, Jordan. Okay, we're gonna make sure we get you taken care of. And the Sprouts have a video. Mm-hmm. I know the youth group was doing this Zoom thing.
They're doing it right now.
Like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think it's part of what they were going to do.
And
in the houses.
Yeah, and so we watched the Sprouts video. It's great.
Oh, you've already watched it?
Our kids haven't watched it.
You mean just you and Sheree have seen it? Okay.
Yeah, I watched about half of it, and then you came over, I think. And so
I love story time with Uncle Andrew.
Yeah,
like when he's
guys,
reading
if you haven't
scripture
been
and stuff.
keeping up with this stuff that
so
our children's ministry and youth ministry are doing online, check that out too. They're pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll see you guys later. Grace and peace.